I never imagined that my life would change after rescuing a beaten mother and her child. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting distorted shadows on the alley walls. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but the air vibrated with an unsettling tension. That's when I heard the muffled sobs. It pierced through the silence like a knife. I rushed toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I could barely breathe. I turned a corner and found her, a woman, frail and trembling, clutching a dirty child to her chest. Their eyes were wide with fear, and I had never seen such desperation. The child's tear-streaked face mirrored the mother's pain. I felt a sudden jolt of compassion. I couldn't just walk away. "Are you okay?" I stammered, reaching out a hand. My palms were sweaty. She looked up, and I noticed the bruises blooming on her skin, angry and dark. My heart sank. Before I could process it, she nodded, but her eyes screamed otherwise. The child whimpered, gripping her shirt like a lifeline. In that moment, the world around us vanished. It was just the three of us, trapped in that alley of suffering, but something felt off. I glanced over my shoulder, a chill slithering down my spine. I swore I heard footsteps echoing down the street. They were slow at first, deliberate. My heart raced for a different reason now. I turned back to the woman, her breath quickening, and I sensed her fear heightening. Who was coming? I wanted to protect them, but how? I offered my arm, and she hesitated, the weight of fear in her eyes. A sudden crash shattered the silence. A bottle broke somewhere far off, echoing like a gunshot. Time froze. Then it happened. The woman grasped my hand tightly, her fingers trembling. "Please, help us," she pleaded, and the urgency in her voice crumbled the last of my resolve. A flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure loomed in the shadows, slinking closer. I felt my stomach drop. This was no chance encounter. It felt preordained, like something dark and twisted had drawn us all together. I could hear my heartbeat roaring in my ears, drowning out everything else. I had to act. Just as I turned to flee, I felt a tug on my sleeve. The child clung to me, panic etched across his tiny face. "Stay. Don't leave us." The weight of his small body grounded me. Another crash rang out, a shout echoed in the distance, and my hands shook, unsure of what to do. I stared into the mother's eyes, seeing a flicker of hope mixed with despair. In that moment, I understood, this wasn't just about rescue. This was the beginning of something much larger than I could fathom. I had stepped into something deeper, something that would change me forever. What was I getting myself into? I had no idea. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadows stretched longer as the figure inched closer, the moonlight revealing just enough to make out the contours of a face twisted with malice. My heart raced, electric with fear, but I couldn't back down now. As I stood there, the mother pressed herself closer to her child, her eyes darting, calculating, desperate. "Please, you have to trust me," I whispered, my voice trembling with urgency. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and I felt an almost magnetic pull from the looming darkness. The child's grip tightened, his small fingers digging into my sleeve. Time slid into an agonizing slow motion. I could sense the raw vulnerability of the woman and her child next to me. It was a reminder of my own poster childhood spent feeling unnoticed and scared. It made my resolve firm. I wasn't leaving them. I couldn't overhear. I shouted to the shadows, my voice cutting through the night. The figure paused, and I took the opportunity to pull the mother and child behind me, shielding them as best as I could. The footsteps halted, tension swelling in the air like a taut string ready to snap. "Who are you?" It was a low growl, and it rattled me. I took a deep breath, trying to mask the quiver in my voice. "Someone who can help," I replied, more bravado than confidence. "You don't want to do this." My words hung in the air, thick with the weight of desperation. Silence followed, a heartbeat of stillness before everything erupted. With a sudden rush, the figure lunged forward, and instinct took over. I shoved the mother and child out of instinct and stumbled back, feeling the impact of a solid body colliding with mine. The world spun as I fought to regain my balance. But through the chaotic haze, I could hear the muffled cries of the mother urging her child to run. In that instant, I caught a glimpse of the child's face, illuminated for a brief moment. A mixture of confusion, fear, and a flicker of defiance flared in his eyes. It opened something in me, a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. Their lives, their safety depended on the choices we made right here and now. The figure, still distorted in the dark, moved in close, and it felt as though the air shifted, weighing heavy with threats. Just as I was about to make my stand, the world felt out of focus, with time collapsing in on itself. My heart raced, not just with fear, but with the determination to protect these two fragile souls. But then, out of nowhere, a voice rang out, sharper than any blade. "Step away from them." In stark relief, a glowing shape emerged, a young woman with fierce determination etched on her face, her arms raised protectively. She was like a beacon, a symbol of unexpected kindness that shattered through the encroaching darkness. The figure recoiled slightly, mired in confusion. "Who are you?" "It's his daughter. I am someone who won't let you hurt them," she declared, still in her resolve. Behind her, a few more silhouettes emerged, fellow warriors against fear and violence. I could hardly process this twist of fate. In the wall of adrenaline and chaos, hope flickered brighter. Perhaps I wouldn't have to shoulder this threat alone. With a roar of defiance, I turned back to the mother and child. "We have to run. Now," I urged, grabbing their hands and signaling for the new arrivals to follow. I could feel the mother's panic under her grip, but she followed my lead, drawing strength from the sudden shift in the narrative. But just as we took a step forward, a flash of light pierced through the darkness, the unmistakable sound of sirens wailing in the distance, drawing closer. My stomach knotted as the unease grew. Before we could escape, the figure shouted a curse and darted back into the shadows, leaving only a trail of tension behind. "Are you okay?" I turned to the mother, her face pale but resolved. She nodded, and I could see the flicker of fight in her eyes. The sirens drew near, yet fears of the unknown still loomed large. "What happens now?" I wondered aloud, my words barely a whisper. The young woman, who had emerged to save us, stepped beside me. "We need to find somewhere safe. They are not done with you too," she said firmly, her gaze steady. "This is just the beginning." And just like that, I felt the weight of the world settle upon my shoulders even more heavily. We hadn't escaped. We had merely stepped into a bigger, webber fight that was much larger than just protecting a woman and a child. As the sirens echoed eerily against the night sky, I understood we were spiraling deeper into a darkness that held secrets I was not yet prepared to unveil. Suddenly, I felt a hand slip from my grip. The child was gone. My heart sank as I spun around, eyes darting frantically through the haze of night, panic cascading through me like a moving tide. Where could he have gone? How could I have lost him? Where is he? I gasped, desperation clawing at my throat. The world around me suddenly felt even more precarious, poised on the edge of a knife, and I couldn't shake the paralyzing fear that we had just begun to unearth something much more sinister than I could have imagined. With every instant that passed, the panic tightened its grip around my chest, constricting my breaths and warping my thoughts. I felt utterly lost, like a bitter anchor pulling me down into the depths. Where had the child gone? How could I stand idly when danger lurked in the unseen corners of the night? The young woman's fierce determination shifted to concern as she sensed my despair. Stay here, she urged, her voice slicing through the tumult of my thoughts. I nodded dumbly, my heart pounding in time with the distant sirens. And then I spotted him, small and vulnerable, peeking out from a cluster of trees a few yards away. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as I noticed the shadows move again, stirring beneath the weight of the trunk. I took a step forward instinctively, but the young woman grabbed my arm, propelling me back. Wait. We don't know if it's safe, she hissed, her eyes scanning the darkness like a hawk searching for prey. But I was already breaking free of her grasp, propelled by instinct and desperation. I have to get him, I gasped. Moving cautiously, I edged closer to the tree, each step a hesitant note of fear and resolve. Hey, I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. It's okay. It's me. The child emerged from his hiding place, confusion and whimsy dancing in his wide eyes. For a moment, I felt the world spin delicately around us, tethered in fragile familiarity. Come on, buddy, we have to. But before I could finish, a harsh laugh cut through the night. The figure was back, emerging from the shadows like a wraith, undeterred by the sirens that unmistakably drew closer. You thought you could run? It sneered, the malice spreading like venom across its lips. No. I shouted, lunging forward, but the child was still rooted to the spot, frozen with the weight of fear. Get down. I yelled, dropping to shield him with my body, but the blow didn't come as expected. The figure hesitated, darkness swirling in its gaze, and then it moved again, darting toward the only exit, the approaching sirens on the latitude of the street. Another figure emerged, too quick to process, catching the first by the shoulder. My heart leapt, the shadows of the night were alive with movement, a chaotic dance unfolding before me. The flashes of anger and desperation played out in the night air, a violent moment of clarity interspersed with the sirens wailing. Run! The young woman's urgent cry pierced the veil of instinct. Go now. She didn't wait for me to respond, she charged at the skirmish, ready to confront the threat that loomed. And just like that, fear took my hand, pulled me and the child away from the chaos, but even in flight, the haunting question lingered. Who were these people? But that would have to wait, survival took precedence. I swallowed hard as we stumbled away from the scene, a few paces behind the group of new allies. The mother was now near me, her own panic once more present as she grasped my arm tightly. Where's my son? He's safe. Right here. I reassured her, glancing down to see the boy following, his small feet thumping directly behind as he clutched onto my shirt. But while I tried to comfort her, I felt the uneasiness creep back. Was he really? I looked backward toward the chaos. The sirens drew ever nearer, their echoes drowning my thoughts, a desperate reminder that help was coming, but perhaps too late. I saw them fighting me, makeshift army against the looming figure, a dance of light, danger, and frenetic energy, but I could barely hold the threads of this reality. We need to keep moving, the young woman shouted, and I sensed the urgency suffusing the very fabric of our existence. We turned a corner, weaving between alleyways, breath hot and erratic, each step heavier than the last. Hope flickered ahead, but shadows still chased us. Then something cold washed over me, an instinct sharper than the air itself. What if they find us? What do we do then? What if I was suddenly gripped by uncertainty, by despair? Rounding yet another corner, I caught sight of a door partially ajar. Without thinking, I bolted toward it. In here, I shouted, pushing the mother and child through first, before ducking in myself. The room felt abandoned, the stale air wrapped around us like a cold blanket. I heard my pulse strumming in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the world outside, but then, amidst the silence, a soft whimper broke through the quiet. My heart dropped. It was the child. He was crouched low, staring into a dark corner, his small body trembling with fear. I don't want to be like them, he whispered near to tears, the weight of his words crashing into me like thunder. The tremor in his voice set off a chain reaction deep within my chest, a stark reminder of the fragility surrounding us. Like who? I managed to ask as I knelt before him, desperate to fight against the fear choking his spirit. Like them, he pointed toward the door, shadowing his eyes with innocence and dread. The bad people. I don't want to be bad. A jolt of pain shot through me. How could a child bear such a weight? I reached out, pulling him close, letting him absorb my warmth while I fought against the inevitable spiraling despair. We're going to be okay, I assured him, though the truth felt painfully skewed. But as my words slipped from my lips, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside the door, the murmur of voices growing louder. They were searching. They were close. My breath hitched. Panic mingled with the hope I clung to, twisting inside me. This felt like only the beginning of something darker, something I had unintentionally invited into our lives. No escape. No way out. And suddenly, I was left grasping at the fraying edges of control, watching as the possibility of safety began to unravel. The footsteps grew louder, heavy with purpose and malice. Every thud against the floor sent a fresh chill through my spine, and I tightened my hold on the child. I forced a smile, a mask of courage that felt threadbare against the encroaching despair. "You're safe with me. I promise," I whispered, though I barely recognized my own voice. The mother glanced toward the door, her expression a whirlwind of emotions: fear, uncertainty, and a flicker of something like hope. "What if they find us?" she murmured, barely able to keep the tremor from her voice. I scanned our surroundings, desperate for a means of escape. The room was scantily furnished, a forgotten space cluttered with dust and shadows. There was a window, but it stood too high to climb through, and the only door was a portal to the dark unknown of our pursuers. "We need to be quiet," I said, but the rustling whispers outside interwove itself with the child's whimpering and the mother's soft sobs, creating a crescendo of fear that echoed in the hollow chamber. Suddenly, the sound of shuffling feet paused, heavy silence enveloping us. A moment stretched on as the tension whispered secrets of what awaited us. "Did you hear that?" A voice grunted, thick with menace. A cold sweat broke out across my brow. "They must be in here." The child, sensing the shift in the air, buried his face into my shoulder. I felt like I was holding the weight of the world, but it was a small, fragile boy against the brutality of oblivion. I squeezed him tighter and cast a glance at the mother, silently pleading for us to remain strong. "We can't let them see us," I whispered urgently, the unyielding resolve piercing through the fear as I shifted my body, blocking him further. The shadows from the outside world encroached like predators circling their prey, and I could feel my own heartbeat resonating with the primal fight-or-flight instinct as I held the child close. No, I muttered under my breath, frantically trying to appease the panic creeping in. "We're going to be okay." My words were a desperate mantra, a shield against the encroaching darkness. The door creaked slightly as a body pressed against it, then shifted again. My heart nearly stopped. "They are close. What do we do?" the mother pleaded, her voice trembling. I gestured for silence, focusing on the muffled exchange outside growing into an argument. "Something isn't right," one man hissed. The other laughed. "No one's stupid enough to hide in here." The uncertainty churned in my stomach like a storm. Suddenly, against all logic, I felt a spark of instinctive rebellion, a voice inside whispering that we wouldn't be the ones hiding anymore. Then I saw a child's small hand trembling against my sleeve. I could sense the need in him, almost a fight against the shadows. "I don't want to be bad," he echoed again, the weight of his innocence pulling at my heartstrings. No one should have to bear such a burden. The very thought ignited a fire in me. "No, honey, you're not bad. You're brave, and brave people do what they have to survive." The child looked up at me, trust weighing heavily in his gaze, and I felt the burgeoning need to protect him and redirect it beyond the confines of the four walls we occupied. With newfound resolve, I glanced toward the window, calculating. "We're going to find another way out." The child nodded, however hesitantly, his grip tightening on my shirt. The voices outside began to grow more frantic, the ominous laughter still echoing in the back of my mind. "Unless you want them to catch us, we need to move now," I breathed. I pulled away from the corner, my mind racing to carve a path through the shadows. The window. It was the only way. I quickly scooped the child into my arms, feeling the fear radiating from him, his posture stiff against my chest. "Hold on tight," I urged, and he wrapped his small arms around my neck tightly, burying his face in my shoulder. "Wait," the mother said, her voice cutting through my momentum. "If you leave, there's no time." I insisted, the urgency pressing down on me like a lead weight. "We need to move. If we stay here any longer," I didn't finish. The silence between us paused with an unspoken fear that transcended words, but just then, there it was again, the door rattling under the weight of a presence, their impatience manifesting in the smash of a fist. Panic surged anew in me. "Go!" I shouted, the command erupting from the depths of my being. I helped the mother up as well, urging her to follow as I edged toward the window. "We'd have to jump on 3, I whispered, glancing back towards the door again, acutely aware of the urgency of our escape. The sound of wild laughter broke through again, ominous and keen, ushering dread into the air around us. 1, 2, 3, I propelled myself through the window, the force of it tearing at my skin. The child let out a startled gasp as we tumbled into the frigid night air together, rolling across the damp ground beneath us. The mother followed suit moments later, her breath hitching as she landed beside us, but the laughter was closer now, mocking and furious. We had to move, but the chaos of uncertainty filled me once again like a rising tide. As we scrambled to our feet, I caught a glimpse of familiar figures advancing swiftly through the alley behind us, shadows trailing as they moved with purpose. Fear clenched my chest once more, haunting our every move. Anger bubbled up inside of me, a deep-seated instinct to fight back, to protect, to save them. But how? Over there, I shouted, pointing toward a narrow gap between 2 buildings, my mind racing with potential routes. "We can hide there." But as we dashed forward, a chilling realization came crashing down. My body was too heavy, my heart too burdened. A lawless fear was having its way with me, and I could barely keep the child steady as we sprinted. The mother reached for her son, and I wondered if I could truly outrun the demons of this night. The air was thick with desperation as we dove into the narrow passage. Echoes of the night drew in close, the laughter chilling our resolve. Then, just as we rounded the corner, a sudden crack like thunder rebounding among us left us all breathless. The shadows roared to life, and my heart plummeted as I realized this darkness could swallow us whole, dragging us into a fate worse than what loomed behind us. In that singular moment, I saw it all: the fragility of our bond, the risks of this chaotic flight, and how thin the threads of survival truly were. But as I turned to look back, fearing that it might be the end, I caught sight of the figures closing in, their expressions ready to pounce on our desperation. My breath hitched. The night had never felt so dark, and the weight of impending choices I had yet to make settled heavily in my soul. There was no time to second-guess. Our lives depended on what came next, and just as I thought hope could no longer exist in this nightmare, a war cry greeted us. Strong arms extended from the shadows. I hid a potential refuge, imagined as our lifeline, but was it truly salvation, or further entrapment in the tangled web that this night had spun around us? The answer hung before me, pregnant with uncertainty and desperation, as I stared into the looming unknown. The momentum of desperation propelled us forward into the thick veil of uncertainty. I hesitated for only a heartbeat, analyzing the strong figures moving swiftly toward us. The warmth of hope and fear grappled fiercely within me, tearing at my resolve. The shadows merged into one, blurring the lines between savior and captor. "Over here." A voice broke through the chaos, sharp and piercing like a beacon cutting through the dark. In that instant, I knew, these figures loomed in the stillness ahead to help, to shield us from those who pursued. But could we trust them? Could I risk the lives of the mother and child on a fleeting instinct? My instinct screamed at me to keep running, but the warmth in that voice tugged at something deep inside, urging me to believe again. As I glanced behind, I saw the flicker of looming dread, dark silhouettes chasing us with sinister glee, their intent clear in the way they closed the distance. "Now!" That same voice shouted with renewed urgency, and I could see one of the figures extend a hand, the familiar sight of what could be safety glimmering like a mirage in the desert. I made the decision then, a wild leap of faith. "Come on," I urged the mother, her panicked eyes reflecting my own fear as she shot a glance back at the shadows clawing at our heels. With one trembling hand securing the child against her, she raced into the embrace of the strangers. I followed, weaving through the darkness, and we collided into a hushed room hidden behind crumbling bricks. The door swung shut with a force that echoed like a heartbeat, cutting us off from the cold grasp of night, at least momentarily. We were cloaked in darkness, the sparse light from the dying street lamps trickling through cracks, illuminating faces filled with a mixture of concern and suspicion. I felt another layer of fear settle in, but it was now tethered with a thin thread of hope. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice muffled by a tight throat as I shielded the child, who still clung to me in silent dread. The mother released her hold on him, her eyes darting around the room, fear and gratitude colliding within her. "Friends," one of the strangers said, a woman whose anxious energy was softened by deep lines etched into her face. "We saw what was coming for you. You're safe here for now." The words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my panic, but the shadows outside felt relentless. "For now," I echoed, unsure of how long safety could last in a world so easily plunged into chaos. The tension in the room shifted as the woman gestured to a worn chair in the corner beside a flickering candle. "Sit, all of you. We need to regroup," she instructed, her voice gaining strength. As we gathered near the dim light, I stole glances at the mother, searching for a shred of reassurance. Her eyes reflected uncertainty, yet there was an unspoken bond forming between us, a shared understanding that this nightmare was just beginning. "We were moving, trying to find shelter," I explained, my voice steadying as adrenaline ebbed. "They were right behind us, and I didn't know if we would get away." The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of our circumstances settled like dust in this forgotten space. The other strangers shared grim looks, their fragile alliances forged in the fires of previous battles. I felt the urgency in their unspoken dialogue, a need to prepare for the next inevitable confrontation. "Do you know who's after you?" one of the men asked, crossing his arms tightly across his chest as he surveyed us, trying to gauge our reactions. "There are factions in this city, and they don't play nice. We need to know who's on your trail." Before I could answer, the child's soft voice broke the oppressive quiet. "Are they going to hurt us?" His wide eyes darted between the strangers and his mother, mirroring my own fears. "Of course not, sweetheart." The woman's voice softened as she knelt before him. "You're safe here. We promise." I watched her carefully, my heart aching at the weight placed on such a fragile promise, but somewhere in the back of my mind, doubts brewed. What if this security was but an illusion? What if these kind faces masked something far darker? With every passing moment, I could feel the tightening grip of fate suffocating our tenuous safety. "They know you're here," the man said, an undercurrent of urgency creeping into his tone. "And they won't stop until they find you. We need to figure out a plan." Moments merged into a blur as we all began to speak in hurried tones, outlining desperate escape routes, temporary alliances, piecing together the narrative of our chase. I felt the mother's trembling hand slip into mine, the warmth grounding me amidst the rising tide of fear, the child settling cautiously into her lap. But just as plans began to take form, the walls buzzed with a chilling rhythm, like a heartbeat resonating from the outside. I could see fragments of shadows racing past the thin fabric of the curtains. The laughter, the same sinister laughter from before, vibrated through the very walls of our refuge. The adrenaline shot through me, igniting every nerve. In that moment, I realized that fear had given way to a deeper silence, one filled with the promise of both danger and the possibility of unexpected kindness. Perhaps their intention remained shrouded in mystery, but for the first time tonight, I felt the flicker of hope lingering just out of reach. Then came a sudden thundering knock at the door, a deafening intruder that shattered the fragile silence. The shadows outside lingered ominously, and my heart clenched tight. "Quick. We have to hush," the woman said, fear creeping into her voice. "Everyone, stay low." As I crouched down, cradling the child against my chest and feeling the mother tremble beside me, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face peering into the half-lights from the outside shadows. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the person someone I had thought was lost, a remnant from days I thought had been buried forever. Hope surged with an agonizing swell, colliding with the dread that something sinister awaited us just beyond the Dora junction of fate, a choice to make. And as I prepared for the unknown, a question echoed in my mind, louder than any fear: what would we risk to seize this fleeting moment? And just as I braced for the inevitable confrontation, the door burst open, revealing an all too familiar face cloaked in uncertainty and shadows. Panic gripped the room as the door swung open, every pair of eyes fixating on the figure that disrupted our fragile sanctuary. It was Nia. The sight of her, which should have ignited a spark of joy, instead felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Her presence was the embodiment of every pain and loss that had stitched my heart into a patchwork of despair. Nia. I gasped, her name escaping my lips on a breath of disbelief. The child stirred in my arms, sensing the shift in energy. I could barely comprehend the onslaught of emotions flooding through me. Was it really her? Did she come back for me? Or had the shadows that chased us finally swallowed her whole? Nia, what are you doing here? I demanded, voice barely above a whisper, my heart racing. The air in the room thickened, pregnant with fear and uncertainty. She stood at the threshold, her eyes wild and searching. I didn't think I'd find you here, she replied, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. I heard rumors, whispers of movement in the streets. I came to warn you, but it seems I've led them right to you. The words hung heavy, and the burden of guilt she carried was palpable in the way her shoulders slumped, as if she bore the weight of the world. It reminded me that survival was rarely an isolated journey. It was fraught with entangled fates, each intersection seeding further turmoil. We need to go, she added urgently, scanning the room as if the very walls had ears. The shadows had found us, and we needed to move before they seeped inside, wrapping us in their cold embrace. The mother's grip tightened on her child, and I shot her a glance filled with unspoken questions. Was Nia truly here to help? Or was she tethered to the very forces that meant us harm? Trust her, I urged, making a decision that felt like stepping onto a precipice. We've been chased long enough. She could be our way out. Nia took a tentative step forward, her eyes holding a flicker of hope that threatened to ignite but was snuffed out by the ever-looming dread. I can lead you to a safe place, she continued, her voice resolute yet laced with fear. But it's risky and they're closing in. Then what are we waiting for? I replied, the urgency of our flight propelling me. We don't have time to waste. We need to act, now. Discreet whispers coursed through the room as silent deliberations unfolded, all eyes darting between Nia and the uneasy faces of the strangers who had taken us in. Trust was a currency we could scarcely afford, but desperation blurred the edges of our caution. In that charged moment, the words we exchanged were layered with trepidation. For every shred of hope I clung to, another part of me screamed to hesitation, to question the risks, the potential betrayal. Could we escape the dark that breathed down our necks while holding on to the threads of these raw relationships? Just as the air hummed with breathless tension, a low rumble emanated from beyond the Dora, reverberation that felt like a portent of something sinister. The child whimpered, a sound that sliced through me with the steely cold of steel against bone, and I felt helpless. Shoo, Nia murmured, kneeling before the child. You're safe. Just a little longer. Her voice radiated warmth, and I could see the connection forging between them, a tender moment couched in the chaos that unfurled around us. Now. The man from before urged, a fire in his tone that commanded my attention. We move now, or we won't move at all. In that instant, we descended into frenzied motion, the room swelling with urgency. Nia turned toward the door, a beacon of uncertain hope, beckoning us forward as shadows crept closer. I sensed the mother's hand slip into mine one last time, an anchor in the maelstrom swirling around us. As we pushed through the door, the reality of our flight crystallized. In an instant, we were out on the street once more, the night alive with danger but lit by the fragile spark of trust ignited through shared struggle. But just as we began to run, laughter erupted from the darkness, a sinister sound lurking behind us, reassuring that the forces we sought to escape were but a heartbeat away. It split through the air, and I felt a shiver shudder through my bones. Faster! Nia cried, sparking more energy into our limbs, the chase igniting a primal instinct within me as we sprinted into the unknown. Panic tightened its grip, clawing at my chest, threatening to choke any remaining hope. Then came the sharp crack of footsteps behind us, Shivi, determined, a cacophony that heralded our pursuers. My heart sank, a pulse of dread echoing as I glanced back, a feeling creeping in that this was far from over. But then, amidst the heady chaos, something unexpected happened. A figure stepped out from an alley, casting their own shadow into the chase. They held a heavy bundle that glistened briefly in the streetlight, a weapon of some kind, perhaps a signal of safety, and with that emerged a terrifying question, one that exploded in my mind like fireworks against the night sky. Who had come to aid us in this desperate moment? Was it ally or enemy? Amidst rapid breaths, racing hearts, and the implosion of fears, something unfurled in me, a deep and resonant thought I hadn't entertained until now. Perhaps our rescue was only the beginning of a far deeper entanglement with the darkness lurking at the edges of hope. The winding alleys of darkness inhaled us, pulling us further into a realm reflecting our dread and heartache. The rigid crack of each footstep behind us steadily grew louder, merging with the thumping cadence of my heart. But as I plummeted deeper into the unknown, an unsteady glimmer of hope surfaced, flickering in my disoriented mind yet refusing to fully ignite. Keep running! Nia cried, the urgency in her voice wrapping around us like a lifeline. I caught a fleeting glimpse of her face, fear etched into every crease, but behind it flickered a fierce determination. She had led us into this life-or-death game, and a shard of regret knifed through my heart, mingling with the instinct to survive. Ahead, the figure in the alley shifted, revealing a tall, hooded silhouette clutching that ominous weapon. My breath caught. What if we mistook an enemy for a friend? What if the night, wrapped in its murky embrace, was throwing us into the clutches of our worst fears? Just as we were about to break past the figure, they stepped into our path with surprising grace, ease sharpening the air between us. Not so fast, the voice dripped with an unsettling smoothness that didn't quite belong to the shadows. Nia halted mid-stride, her body tense but eyes unwavering, as she recognized the figure. Tegan! She breathed. Relief swirled with uncertainty. I felt the mom's hand tighten on mine. She could sense the danger lingering beneath this unexpected acquaintance. Tegan was known as a dealer in secrets and riddles, shrouded in the dubious morality of the underworld. Are you with them? Nia demanded, pushing through the panic thread in my veins. We can't afford more betrayal. Tegan chuckled softly and lifted a hand, revealing not a weapon but a small map crudely drawn on a piece of fabric, stained and fragile. Not betrayal. A lifeline. The voice, once smooth, now rocked with an undercurrent of urgency. I can show you the path if you can trust me. The walls began to close in, my gut a tangled web of doubts. But the laughter still echoed faintly behind us like a haunting lullaby, and the threatening footsteps were no longer just shadows, they were alive and inching closer. The fear of capture battled with the fear of trusting a stranger, drawing me deeper into despair. I looked at Nia, desperately searching for reassurance, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Is this the safer route you promised? I asked her, half hoping she would say yes, half bracing for the confirmation of my darkest fears. It won't be easy, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, heaviness wrapping every word. But we have no choice. I glanced at the mother, whose child had gone silent, but I could read every worry etched upon her face. I needed to protect them both, yet doubt festered in my mind like an old scar that refused to heal. Was I putting their lives in jeopardy by trusting someone intimately acquainted with the darkness? Go, Tegan urged, unwavering, as the laughter grew louder. This way, now. I swear on my own life, it'll lead you to safety, but you must follow without question. A tremor of hesitation swept through me. I felt like a ship caught in a storm, tossed between two foreboding waves, one of despair and the other of hope. But each breath I took filled with desperation for these two vulnerable souls beside me, each pause echoing their need for safety. The darkness buttoned down the uncertainty in my chest, suffocating every rational thought, While a minuscule flame of hope began to flicker, "Let's go," I finally declared. The weight of my decision pressed against my heart, a binding oath to move forward together, yet the rope tightened with each step we took. We bolted past Tegan, who gestured us forward into the labyrinth of alleys, urging us on with a swift turn of their shoulders. We ran through narrow paths that twisted like veins through the body of a shorn city, the wind howling around us as if echoing the turbulence of our desperation. I focused on the child while my mind spun with a cyclone of thoughts. Who was Tegan, really? Would this apparent sanctuary be any better than the lacking shadows of our past? The rhythm of our footsteps resonated like a drumbeat in a funeral march, a counterpoint to the sinister laughter that still echoed faintly behind. Every corner we turned felt like a hide-and-seek game with our demons, the thrill of the chase coupled with the ominous anticipation of capture. And then, as we stumbled into a wider street illuminated by the sickly glow of a flickering street lamp, a chilling shout rang out from somewhere in the distance. "We found them!" Panic surged through me like a burst dam, flooding every ounce of reason. "This way." Tegan guided us down another alley. The looming shadow of the darkness was closing in, urging me to let fear take the wheel, but just as hope flickered into view, potential escape from this chaos, a gasp erupted from the mother beside me, her face paling. "No!" she exclaimed, her feet stuttering to a halt. I whipped around, following her gaze only to see a figure standing at the end of the alley, a silhouette carved against the night. Instinct screamed at me to run, a visceral reaction that rippled through my body and had me wrapping my arm around the little one for protection. "Oh, you know them." I turned back to her, the words clinging dangerously to my lips, every beat of my heart pounding louder against the encroaching shadows, but everything caved in, a wave crashing upon us that rolled the familiarity and horror into a chilling blend of recognition. I squinted through the dark only to see the unmistakable features of a face I had thought lost forever, someone tied to our past, to the very darkness we tried to escape. The scream lodged in my throat, and in that moment, not just our lives but the fragile bonds of our surrender to this encroaching chaos teetered on the brink of ruin. The weight of the revelation crashed down upon me, kneecapping my ability to think or breathe. The last time I had seen that face was shadowed by a world of betrayal and loss, seemingly sealed forever within the tomb of my memories. But here they stood, impossibly alive, a living testament to the twisted fate that had brought us together again. "Jude," I whispered in disbelief, the name slipping from my lips like an uninvited ghost. My heart raced, memories flooding in like a tide, lapping at the shores of my present with a painful familiarity. Jude took a step forward, as white and troubled, the thin, worn fabric of their clothing hanging loosely, as if they had been caught in this terrible storm for far too long. The flickering street lamp threw sharp shadows across their cheekbone, illustrating the weight of anguish etched into every line of their face. I felt the tension in the air, the wound of history stretching taut between us, ready to snap. "Why are you here?" I demanded, though it felt futile, my heart beating erratically, each pose a new question dangling just out of reach. There was a lifelong longing mixed with the horror of what the world had become since we lost each other. "Get away from here," Jude hollered suddenly, urgency slicing through the explains of empathy blossoming in my chest. "They're hunting you. You need to run." Behind them, I could sense the shadows creeping closer, weaving a cloak of dread that enveloped us all. Panic tightened its grip on my throat. "But I thought I was dead." Jude cut in, practically choking on the words. "No time. It's a trap. They know you're vulnerable, and it's only a matter of moments before the Enya pulled me back as the mother's anguished hope began morphing into panic. "We can't expose ourselves like this," she insisted, gasping. "We can't just stand here," but Jude's eyes were desperate, flickering like the flame of a candle fighting against the winds of fate. "Please. I did what I had to do to survive. They're on me, too. You have to trust me, I know a way out." Conflicted emotions boiled over in me, a storm of loyalty and instinct tearing me apart. I didn't want to lose Jude again, but each second stretched interminably as the shadows loomed larger, breathing down our necks. I met Nia's gaze, her uncertainty mirroring my own, each heartbeat like a countdown in the dark. "Go," Jude urged, voice cracking with raw realization. I'll hold them off. Just go. The mother's child clung tighter to her side, innocence and fear mingling in a hard knot just like the one in my own chest. Risk felt like a blade hovering so close to our lives, ready to carve away whatever string of hope we clashed. I can't leave you, I yelled, but the fear boiled inside me, melting the words before they could fully escape. Trust me, Jude shouted, fierce eyes locking on mine, and in that singular moment, something deep within me fled the burning conviction to protect those I loved. My hand reflexively tightened around Neos and the mother's grasp as I pulled them back, weighing Jude's life, our connection, against the fragile flicker of safety that hung just out of reach. We have to go. Now, I urged, only half aware of my own shaking voice, barely able to pull myself away from the familiarity of Jude's agony. Nia nodded, raw determination crafting a resolve stronger than fear. Move, she shouted, her focus unflinching as she pressed forward into the darkness, even as tears stung my eyes. We broke into a run, propelled by a mix of heartache and adrenaline. The hollow echo of footsteps chased us, a vicious reminder that escape was only a temporary act. But the faces of those we risked it all for hovered in the periphery of my thoughts, lighting the path ahead with small sparks of urgency. Jude, I'm so sorry. I yelled out into the oppressive night, my voice swallowed by the shadows. The hint of betrayal tasted bitter on my tongue, but as we turned corner after corner, it held all the sweetness of a truth yet to be uncovered, a truth that transformed every ounce of suffering into a potential ray of hope. But as I turned to glance back, the flickering street lamp illuminating the path behind us, I caught a glimpse of a figure slipping through the darkness. My heart sank. The shadows had given birth to something more tangible, something that struck the chord of dread deep in my soul. Run! I screamed, that single cry ripped through the air as we dashed into another twisting alleyway, breathless and terrified. The mother stumbled, and my instinct kicked in to catch her, pulling her to her feet as her child gazed up at me with wide, terrified eyes. Just when I thought our escape was inching ever closer, a strangled cry bellowed through the night air, unmistakably Jude's anguished echo blending seamlessly into the din of the darkened city, filling the spaces where hope once resided. In that moment, it became heartbreakingly clear, horror was not merely trailing in the shadows behind us, it had taken root in the very fabric of our lives. And as we sprinted into the abyss, fear caressed my heart like a sharpened blade, marking this moment not just as an escape, but as the beginning of an overwhelming storm. The lamplight flickered again, and as I turned the corner, the weight of it all crashed down anew. The alley opened into an unfamiliar square, a chilling calm washing over us, where hope stood layered in the fog like an apparition, and in its depths, an unexpected sinister presence lurked, waiting. The fog seemed to thicken as we stepped into the square, wrapping around us like a damp shroud. I could barely catch my breath, each gasp filled with the weight of uncertainty and fear. The mother's child clung tightly to her side, their small frame trembling, and Neo's fingers dug into my forearm, both of us rooted in a shared dread that felt inescapable. Where do we go now? Neo's voice broke the silence, her eyes darting around, desperately searching for refuge amid the shadows. The square loomed ahead, ghostly statues and empty benches stood as silent witnesses to our plight, their stark forms magnifying the stark reality of our situation. At the far side of the square, the walls leaned in as if conspiring against us. Jagged edges of stone protruded, making the space feel restricted, claustrophobic, as if our fears were drawing the very walls closer. We should find a place to hide, I whispered, the fear not bothering to disguise itself in my voice. Somewhere we can catch our breath, regroup. The words felt absurdly vain amidst the turmoil raging inside me, knowing that I had almost lost Jude again while grasping only a glimpse of hope. As we inched across the cobblestones, I stifled a rising wave of panic, my thoughts racing back to Jude's anguished cry. I couldn't shake the urgency of their parting message, the lingering resonance of betrayal still clinging to my heart. Was it worth trusting a figure from a fractured past? Would they betray us yet again? Neo's attention snapped towards a large, crooked tree that provided little shelter, its gnarled branches twisting ominously into the fog. Over there, she urged, fear-laden determination fueling her actions. Make a run for it. We sprinted toward the tree, urgency spurring us on as echoes of the city's hopelessness danced around us. My heart pounded furiously, matching the rhythm of our hurried footsteps. As I reached the tree, we slipped into the shadow it cast, the thick foliage wrapping around us like a desperate embrace. For a moment, there was silence. We pressed against the tree, breathing heavily, hearts racing in synchrony. The mother cast wary glances towards the square, cradling her child protectively as terror flickered in her eyes. "I don't want to die," she whispered, her voice threaded with anguish. "Not like this." I turned to her, crafting a response that would lend comfort, that might lift her gloom. "We're alive right now. We just need to stay together," I said, though even the words felt insubstantial, a tissue paper shield against the storm outside. Then suddenly, the darkness shifted. I could hear the faintest whisper of hurried footsteps, a low murmur washing over our hiding place, threatening to slice through the fragile silence. The chilling sound sent shivers coursing down my spine as I turned to Nia, eyes wide with shared fear. "Do you hear that?" I breathed, panic not merely nipping at my heels but clawing at my insides. "Yes," she replied, straining to listen, the intensity in her gaze amplifying. A hint of strength surfaced in her demeanor, igniting a glimmer of bravery amidst the shadows. "They are close. We need to move fast." As I moved to grab the mother's arm, I realized it was trembling. "We can't. Their voices are right there," she whimpered, casting a glance over her shoulder, her child clutching her tighter, sensing the gravity of our predicament. At that moment, a flicker caught my eye from the corner of the square. Figures cloaked in shadows lined the periphery, peering into the depths of the night. My heart sank further into the depths of despair. Those figures were menacing specters, silhouettes lurking, waiting for our every move. "What do we do?" I whispered, the question almost trembling across my lips. Nia's expression hardened, a surge of fierce combativeness igniting within her. "We don't give in to fear. We fight." Just then, another voice, softer but unmistakable, cut through the darkness. A familiar timbre I recognized, a lifeline adorned with hope amidst despair. "Whatever you do, don't go into the light." All three of us turned, wide-eyed and breathless. It couldn't. Better words cast shadows of confusion, painting both dread and possibility in equal measure. There, stepping out of the lingering haze of fog, was Jude's figure, half cloaked in the shadows, their face a portrait of resilience. "Jude!" I gasped, a wave of emotion surging within me. Life surged like wildfire, but dread lingered at the edges of my heart. They were alive, yet still tethered to the same looming threat. "Run!" Jude shouted suddenly, panic etched across their features. "It's coming. Trust me." The urgency in their voice shattered the momentary haze of disbelief. I grabbed Nia's arm, yanking her forward, but a sense of dawning realization fluttered in my gutter sense that this moment was not the resolution I longed for, but a precursor to an overwhelming storm. The darkness recoiled, and dread curled around my spine as I forced myself to witness what was happening as shadowy figures began to advance, weapons glinting in the shrouded light. In that moment, I understood this was the tipping point. No longer just our escape, but a reckoning of past choices and futures we couldn't escape. And as we plunged away from safety, my heart ached with the knowledge that no matter how tightly we held on to hope, every step forward could lead us further into chaos. The certainty pierced through the night like a dagger. This chaos wasn't merely behind us, but intertwined with our very fate. The moment suspended in time, I hesitated, fear gripping my heart once more. Then, with a final, startled breath, we took off, running into the depths of an uncertain night, where shadows were not merely a backdrop but the foreboding messengers of fate lurking just beneath the horizon. The chase was relentless, echoing through the narrow streets like a haunting symphony of despair. Each of my desperate gasps for air tangled with the weight of hesitation in my heart, thrumming against the beat of fleeing shadows behind us. In a haze, the faces of the past began to intermingle with glaring reality. First Jude, now this overwhelming sense of impending doom clinging to my every thought. But as we sprinted forward, propelled by sheer necessity, something deep in my chest began to stir. It demanded I confront the fragments of my past that had so ruthlessly sought to entrap us in fear. Nia, keep moving. I backed, my voice choked with urgency, but she faltered for just a brief second, her eyes locking onto Jude's frantic gaze. In that moment, everything hung in the Balenciaga purgatory of lost faith and fractured alliances. Trust me. Jude shouted again, the terror amplifying their resolve. But beneath that raw urgency was something else, a glimmer of truth begging to unravel the mess we'd fashioned with our lives. Staring into Jude's eyes, I felt the storm of emotions pulling in my chest, an ache for lost moments blended with the raw impulse to protect those I held dear. We're running toward danger again. A voice in my head screamed, and it rattled me. But the shadows behind me wouldn't relent, growing bolder and closer. Before I could respond to the conflicting swirl of confusion and despair, we dove into the alley behind the tree, collapsing into a tangled heap of limbs and panic. The mother, cradling her child close, cast a desperate glance around her, while Nia caught her breath, trembling beside me. I took a moment to steady my racing heart, the adrenaline coursing through my veins more intoxicating than fear itself. What if we're running straight into a trap? The mother's voice trembled, pulses of panic brightening her eyes. I could see her mind frantically working, piecing together the chaos that had ensnared us. Then we fight, together, Nia proclaimed, her resolve sharper than any blade, illuminating the fractured corners of our night. And in her declaration, I sensed the weight of sacrifice and solidarity tethering us together. But the truth of our predicament weighed like a leaden anchor, past betrayals and hidden regrets clawed at my insides. The labyrinth surrounding us suffocated, each breath mingling with haunting echoes, but I felt a fire begin to awaken inside me, a pulse whispering stories of duty and affection that extended beyond every shadow, beyond every nightmarish pursuit. Then, Jude stepped further into the dim glow of a flickering lamp, a physical embodiment of the turmoil that lurked in every choice we had made. This isn't about running, this is about confronting what's haunting us, Jude said, their voice raw yet steady, embodying a strength that waded through the waters of our personal history. We have to fight the darkness, or it will consume us. A flicker of hope ignited alongside my doubt. Maybe there was still a way to reclaim not just our lives but also the tangled threads of our past. You're right, I managed to croak out, a thin line of conviction forming in me. We can stand together against this. We won't shield ourselves in shadows any longer. Nia looked at me, her eyes bright with unspoken recognition. But we need a plan, we can't face this blindly. So we began to assemble the pieces, hushed voices weaving through the air as we contemplated our next move. The mother, a picture of tenacity wrapped in fragility, nodded, determination etched across her face. We create our own light, even in this darkness, but before our plan could fully coalesce, a cacophony of footsteps echoed dangerously close. The shadows had caught up now. Jude exclaimed, eyes scanning for an exit. It was a fleeting moment, a sliver of time where intentions collided into action. We burst from the alley, vulnerability raw and exposed, but with the reins of fear strung tightly in the hands of our courage, adrenaline propelled us forward, the night twisting into a surreal blur of motion, each heartbeat punctuated by the pounding. Footfalls closing in, the laughter echoing behind us, haunting like a dark reminder of the past. No longer just specters, these figures carried the weight of our fears, the lingering betrayal tightening its grip. In a moment of wild necessity, I recalled the treacherous paths where traveled, memories of lost hopes and captured dreams intertwined with the real-time rush of adrenaline. Trust hung delicately in the balance, whispering between shadows and fractured faces. We pushed through. I shouted, igniting the last fragments of my hope into action. We reached a fork, both paths offering promise and peril in equal measure. The silken shadows tangled deep with choices made in haste. Left. I yelled, the decision instantaneous, guided by instinct more than conscious thought. As we surged down that alley, time fractured. I turned back for just a heartbeat, catching sight of Jude racing beside me, the glimmer of our shared past entwined tightly with that piercing connection we shared yet obscured by the chaos. A pang of sorrow echoed within me, intertwined with our shared resolve. But my heart ached, a fear deepening in my gut that our time was fleeting. Jude glanced at me, their visage drowned in determination interlaced with something softer, a flickering promise of reconciliation, and I knew they sensed it too. Fate had intertwined our stories and would continue to shape us, regardless of how harshly our paths varied, but darkness was closing in fast, rushing toward us like a torrential storm, and the shadows were relentless. Our breaths were jagged, tearing through air heavy with the weight of our collective fears. Just as we neared the other end of the alley, a piercing scream echoed behind us, a cruel symphony of panic that stole my breath, resonating with the dreadful truth that shadows can be relentless. All of you go. Jude shouted, and in that moment, my resolve broke open. Caught between the whispers of betrayal and the need to protect those who mattered most, the mother and her child, tears began to spill down my cheeks, tangled with uncertainty and regret. It was then that something snapped deep within me. I couldn't let the darkness snatch away the only sense of family I had just begun to forge. No! I yelled, swinging around only to see the darkness ripple behind Jude, but they didn't waver. They were facing it head-on, ready to carve our path forward. I'll hold them off. Get to safety. They shouted once more, fierce determination simmering beneath the surface. It reverberated through the air, kissing away the shards of hesitation that had tried to hold me back, but something primal seized me. I started, even as the shadows seemed poised to envelop us all. The urgency swelled within me, drowning the underlying fear. Go. Now. Jude's cry propelled me, and as resolutions deepened, I clasped the mother and child's hands and bolted forward with renewed strength, tearing through the veil of shadows, weaving our way out into the night beyond. Time blurred as I let instinct guide, Nia and the mother marching steps with me, every moment thrumming with heartbreak and determination. But as we burst into the open again, the haunting laughter followed, slipping through the darkness like water fluid, shifting and sinister. I risked a glance back, a moment too long, watching as figures engulfed Jude. Clarity and chaos wrestled for dominance, and yet I felt helpless in the grip of uncertainty. Keep moving. Nia shouted urgently, pulling my gaze away. The mother's child squeezed her hand tightly, and the weight of responsibility cracked against the urgency behind us. We had to survive, we had to escape the relentless grasp of our fate. But guilt gnawed at me as we pushed away from the shadows, love and loss melding into something fierce, inextricably marking us beneath the weight of circumstances. We ran, the night swallowing us whole as we sprinted toward an uncertain horizon, each desperate breath filled with the promise of safety, a flickering light we clung to, but even the very notion of hope hung precariously amidst the dark chains of our past. With every echoing footfall that pursued us, every flicker of glimmering trepidation that thrummed deep within me, an undeniable truth settled into my skin: we were more than prey. Together, we were a mosaic of laughter, sorrow, and unrelenting hope, binding us into a resilient force, the light word crafted against the ever-encroaching shadows. And with that thought, we pushed on into the night, aware that the bond we forged had the strength to withstand the darkest storms, because together, we would face whatever lay ahead. We would become more than just survivors, and at that moment, our journey became a flicker against the raging tide of despair. From the depth of uncertainty, we would emerge into something powerful, something capable of forging our own path toward a glimmering dawn, no matter the cost.